Okay. We will start now our Socratic debate between the future and the past, maybe. We will see what happens here. I want Timothy to prove that robotic in spine surgery is present, is not the future.
Thanks very much, Dr. Pimenta. Pleasure to be here. I will say that I am filling in for my colleague, Nick Theodore, who is one of the developers of the Excelsius robot. He couldn't make it today. This is his video cartoon of what he sort of envisioned robotic surgery to be, and he actually came up with this little video back in 2002, so I think it's actually pretty interesting. Obviously, it's not quite as automated yet, but maybe someday. This is not moving forward. These are my disclosures. So why doesn't embracing the past work? Well, as you can see in this video, these women thought they had job security here back in the 1950s, but obviously that's not the case. This is sort of the wave of the future.
And it goes on and on and on. Love goes on and on and on. Oh yeah, oh my darling, would you take me back?
So, you know, we're moving ahead in time now. And so in robotics, there have been almost close to 1,600 orthopedic robotic systems that have been put into place up until 2020. The number of cases per year was up to over 400,000 for all robotics cases worldwide in 2012. The publications in this field have skyrocketed, and the dollars spent are in the billions of dollars range. So how do we get here? So the cranial surgeons, for those of you in neurosurgery know this, this is David Roberts. He was the first to integrate computer navigation with his intraoperative microscope. Similarly, the ISG wand, which came out in 1987, was sort of the prototype for image guidance in spine and cranial surgery. And there's really not a single cranial tumor case done really anywhere in the United States, at least, that does not utilize this technology for taking out brain tumors. John Adler out of Stanford developed the first completely automated robotic system for neurosurgery and spine surgery. This is the CyberKnife, which has sort of revolutionized the radiosurgery or radiation modality treatment for certain tumors. The problem with this device is you really cannot check the accuracy. So modern image guidance is well set up in brain surgery, but it still requires, again, this attention shift that we talked about yesterday in the augmented reality talk. But what are we looking for? We're looking for accuracy, but we're also looking for precision, which is a little bit different, as you can see depicted here. So where do we stand? Looking at conventional accuracy with freehand placement, I think it's much higher than this, actually. Certainly in my hands it is. These are probably older numbers. But over time, there seems to be a trend of improvement in our accuracy all the way up until the current modern day 3D navigated technologies. And these numbers may even be higher. And I think that the robotic surgery is really approaching the 3D navigation numbers. We're trying to avoid this, which was paralysis in a pediatric patient, led to one of the largest lawsuits in the history of the U.S. But again, the cranial surgeons have sort of been beating us to the punch here and have embraced this technology a little bit more than the spine surgeons. We're still somewhat in evolution. We have imaging in surgery, that's image guidance. We have a branch or bridge between surgery and robotics. These are the robotic systems, including Da Vinci and Mako type systems. But in spine surgery, what we need to do is bridge all three of these areas, imaging, surgery, and robotics. And both in POP culture and as well as in science. There's this trend toward this unstoppable freight train that is automation and the need for automation to reproduce things with high accuracy and precision. This was the Fyodorov Institute back in the 1980s, where they were very precocious in this regard in relationship to radiokeratotomy. I don't think we're ever going to get to this point in spine surgery, but it's certainly an interesting concept where these patients are brought to the surgeon and basically just the surgeon stays in the same place and the patient is prepared, anesthetized, certainly not under general, but then just moves over one slot for the surgeon to do the case. So both in technology and in pop culture, this trend in robotics is coming to fruition. I don't think it's a situation where robots are going to be replacing humans. However, it's going to be a situation where the robots are allowing us to do things better. Study out of MIT showing that human machine groups were more efficient than robot or human groups alone. And this concept of cobots, humans working with robots to make things better. In that same MIT study, it reduced the human idle time by about 85%. Now, we're not looking for something like this, but nonetheless, improving efficiency is what it's all about. We want accuracy and precision through automation. Again, probably not a situation where the robots are going to be replacing humans. We need the two to work in conjunction. So what are some of the goals of robotic spine surgery? Well, there are patients, as many of you know, that are seeking out these technologies, both in minimally invasive technologies and in robotic assisted surgery. Reduction of radiation exposure, we heard a little bit more about that today. Earlier in the talks, and certainly doing some of the preoperative planning, which can be done with the robot. It does involve a CT, which we also heard does obviously involve radiation, but certainly if you were going to get a preoperative CT anyway, doing that planning based off of the preoperative image really reduces your radiation exposure. The robot gives us a chance for, again, for procedural consistency with automation, accuracy, and precision. We talked about either the options for preoperative or intraoperative planning. I'm not going to belabor this point. I'll just run through this quickly, but it does have the potential to reduce radiation exposure both to the patient and the surgeon. So this technology can be married with other forms of imaging modalities, fluoroscopy or preoperative CT merged with fluoroscopy. And so you don't necessarily have to have all of the bells and whistles to adopt this technology. Yes, it is expensive, but the imaging modalities are somewhat flexible. We want real-time information, the same that is offered through conventional 3D navigation. And then workflow is key. Again, this is just showing how easy it can be to plan instrumentation placement intraoperatively. You don't even have to remove your gloves. We've found at Hopkins that it's sort of easier to do the planning and improves your workflow preoperatively based on a preoperative CT scan, and it certainly makes it a lot faster. This is just a case. 90-year-old woman comes in with previous non-instrumented fusion. Falls, breaks her back. The MR image showed stir signal down at L5S1, not up at L12. And the robot was used percutaneously to very easily place screws, minimally invasively, gets a 90-year-old woman through the surgery and up again. Again, another sort of niche type of case, but this patient comes in with a BMI of 50. Ankylosing spondylitis. I don't know if I would term this a burst fracture, but definitely a chance type fracture as these things break like long bones. And again, this could be done all percutaneously and very efficiently. Our typical patient in Baltimore being on call is a patient like this with osteomyelitis and discitis, and because they're on heroin, they have enough pain control to get them through until they get a great deformity like this. But again, this was a case that was nicely done by my colleague, Dr. Theodore, with robotics. We can do some approaches that we may not ordinarily do with a robot, like this trans S1 L5 type of screw for the spondylolisthesis. And then the other thing is we can verify the accuracy and the precision. So I think that and certainly this, you can make this case with navigation, but as we're adopting this technology, we're getting CT scans afterwards, and then we're marrying the planned trajectory with the actual outcome. So not only is it accurate, but then we can see how the precision is. And we're not always precise. Sometimes, we're accurate, but not precise, as shown here. But it allows us to try to improve, and there's an academic component to this that I think allows us to get better. There are studies, and I think this is, again, debated. I think we talked a little bit about this morning. I think whatever works best for you or in your hands is probably what works best. But there are studies that show that perhaps robotic-assisted pedicle screw placement can improve upon accuracy compared to freehand placement, like in this study where there was a statistical difference from 86% to 95%. We've done some similar work at Hopkins looking at the results so far and have had good accuracy in 28 patients, 100% accuracy, reduced blood loss, decreased hospital stay. Did not show that the complication rates were different, but we're able to collapse the OR time in a learning curve fashion. And in talking with Nick Theodore, I haven't done enough of these cases yet, but he sort of feels that it's this 20 case a learning curve where you can really decrease your operative time over conventional means. The other issue here is training residents and the types of residents that we're training, this kind of millennial mindset. The younger generation is used to being on iPhones and playing video games. There's some interesting papers, not necessarily scientific, one by Bob Spetzler talking about how kids back in the day were much more skilled and had much more dexterity with their hands because using an iPhone doesn't really teach any dexterity. And so this type of technology, I think, is also going to be embraced by the up-and-coming generations. A study out of Shreveport, Louisiana showed that they could also reduce cost with a robot. Obviously, the initial spend for this is significant. But in this case, they were able to show a greater than $600,000 per year cost savings with robotic-assisted spine surgery. The other issue here is that the robot can be married with other technologies and also other procedures outside of spine surgery. And this can obviously have a benefit when you're trying to pitch this type of technology to your hospital administrators. We're also sort of expanding the focal length on this technology, obviously starting with posterior instrumentation placement in the degen environment, but expanding to MIS applications, pelvic fixation, trauma, and then working toward things like improving tumor resections and osteotomies, I think, as this technology can be married with other technologies and navigation, perhaps even augmented reality. So to finish up here, robotics and spine surgery is a frontier. It's definitely here to stay. There's a learning curve, as with all technology. Integration of workflow is key. One size doesn't fit all. It can be married with various imaging modalities. The millennials will drive this type of technology. But, as was mentioned earlier today, we definitely need a study group in this area to collect data and show that the data really improves outcomes. I know my counterpoint in this discussion is going to have some things to say about robotic surgery, but he's actually given talks on this area of spine surgery. These were the conclusions he reached, that robotic guidance provides for accurate screw placement in the majority of cases. It's in the early phase, but a steep learning curve, like with any technology, and obviously improving workflow. He's also published in this area and showed quite good accuracy with the robot, placing 116 out of 116 screws accurately. And I've heard a rumor, I may not have my information correct, I'll let him correct me if I'm wrong, that he's also involved with developing a robotic system for one of the companies. So I don't know if that's, if it's really a hoax, maybe until his system comes out. Thank you.